thank you, committee members, for giving me the opportunity to testify. I want to just follow up and add a little bit more on 2 points that Jerry made. First, and I think this is an important point that Aaron touched on, there's nothing in this bill that removes the department's discretion to deny or approve permits. There's nothing in this bill that requires the department to approve a permit application. They still maintain the same level of discretion they had to give thumbs up or thumbs down the permit. The other point that I want to touch on, or I actually want to direct you to the same page that Aaron directed you on, which is page 28 of the bill. Like you, I saw this for the first time last week, so I'm still trying to get my arms around this bill. But I think page 27, 28 are the most important sections of this bill because it describes the nature of the approval process for individual permits. And particularly, if you take a look at lines 13 through 24, that outlines the standards for issuing permits. And Aaron properly hit on 2 of them. The first one was the avoid standard. That's lines 17 through 19, and that's what the practical alternatives are considered. The second one is the minimize standard, lines 20 through 21. And there's been a lot of talk about mitigation, where it fits in the process. Under this bill, I think mitigation fits into the minimize analysis, and that's different than current law, which considers mitigation after the fact. So the way I look at this is, as part of the analysis, they consider the mitigation efforts as part of the minimization efforts. But the third provision is the one that was not touched on. And I consider this to be the catch-all provision, or as Jerry mentioned, it's the holistic approach. And take a look at the language. Because remember, as a permit applicant, the department can deny a permit based on any of these 3 criteria. Look at number 3. The proposed project will not result in a significant adverse impact to wetland functional values, insignificant adverse impact to water quality, or in other significant adverse environmental consequences. Almost every single one of the scenarios that have been raised so far could be addressed under number 3. If it's the last wetland within a watershed, it never satisfies number 3. The department can deny the proposed project. Number 3 is the catch-all. And it's interesting that if you take a look at this term functional values, this is the holistic approach. Functional values is actually defined at the top of the page. And it requires the department to go through a variety of factors. And they have to consider the direct impacts of the proposed project, the cumulative impacts. I think Representative Halsey, you raised that issue earlier. Potential secondary impacts of the project. The impact of the functional values resulting from mitigation required under number 5. And the big one, and this is the one that I think is probably most important in this bill, one that we were advocating from early on, the net positive or negative environmental impact of the proposed project. This net environmental benefit concept, as we like to call it, allows the department to consider the entire scope of the project and determine, is the environment better off as a result of the project? After considering mitigation and everything else, under the current framework, you never got to consider mitigation, you never got to consider some of these alternatives because it's such a rigid analysis where it's avoid, minimize, and then mitigation. This allows the department to consider everything. And if they determine that the environment is better off under this net environmental benefit analysis, they can approve it. If there was one change that I would recommend to this bill, it would to feature this provision a little bit more. What we would do is, I would have this entire net environmental benefit analysis be the analysis for functional values, and then consider direct impacts of a proposed project, cumulative impacts, potentially secondary impacts to determine whether or not there's a net environmental benefit. But I think this net environmental benefit concept is something that we were pushing for early on because it gives the department the ability to consider some of these alternatives and allows them to address every single one of those scenarios that you've raised. If they don't feel if the environment is better off, the department can deny the permit. I think that's an important point that I really wanted to emphasize here. That concludes my testimony. I'd be happy to answer questions.